And we are live. So what do y'all want to talk about? We can talk about unit testing. I've got some basic stuff already set up for that, so we can kind of walk through it if you want. Otherwise, it's just really it's just Q&A, whatever we can figure out.
Just half reading the chat as you're talking, but on my side, I mean, I would definitely look at some unit testing stuff but I feel more in my case, I feel like I'm not to that point yet, so I haven't really even thought about it. And I don't know, what I've been struggling with the most, at least, is getting like passing those page requests, whether it was in the first milestone or even this one now in spring. I cannot get anything that ever worked the way I want it to. Trying to go from like a form to the next page or whatever it may be. But
okay, well, I can definitely, if you want, I can definitely throw together a quick and dirty form and post it back to a controller method, and then hopefully do a redirect to a results page if you'd like.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you want it, I don't know if, I guess probably not a big deal to do it, but we were talking about one in that what was the thread? It was the final draft thread that the new professor made. There's that one that was posted in there we were talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
So like what you said in there makes sense to me, looking at his example, but when I look at his example, none of that stuff is there.
Huh.
Or yeah, I'm crazy. Maybe it is, but
well, let's see. Tell you what, I'll download what he's got there real quick, and we'll just take a look at it.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, you ain't got to call me out in the group chat. I know I blew off an assignment, but that usually only hurts me by 1 letter grade, not damn near 2.
I am doing surprisingly well in this class too, which is why I was also surprised. But missing the paper at least helps make a little sense of it. But yeah, I don't know how my milestone 1 will go, but up to this point, I am actually running 100 still.
Hey, there you go.
I think I'm at the point where I think the grades coming in are going to start tanking me a bit, but we'll see.
No, I think you'll be fine, man. I mean, because I think, and I can't really speak for him because I know the guy about as well as y'all do, but I think that he understands where we're coming from as far as, you know, having been kind of left on our own for the first 5 weeks. So I think he's going to be very gentle with us. Like his feedback is probably going to be pretty strong. You know, it's going to seem fairly strongly worded and critical, but that's because he's helping us try to catch up. But I don't think that he's going to be that brutal on our final grade itself. I think he's going to be as gentle as he can be.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right, so I'm going to open up that project that old boy posted in the discussion forum and just take a look. Let's see. So extract all. Hey, Jenny.
Hi.
Well, while I'm waiting on this to extract, I want to let y'all know the crazy thing I did today. I put in for a senior software engineer position.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, hashtag over my head. Way in over my head. But we'll see what happens. All right. I'll give this guy a little bit of privacy by taking his name off the project. Oh, wait, Jennifer, is this the guy that teaches mobile apps? Oh, yeah, I need to talk to him.
Hey.
Wait, am I breaking up? Is it that bad?
Yeah.
Yeah, I gave it a second or two, but yeah, it definitely is pretty consistent, it seems, for the last minute or two.
Let me see if it's the fan interfering with things. Give me just a sec. All right, y'all. Is this any better?
About the same.
I
At least,
tried.
yeah.
Not sure what's going on there because y'all aren't cutting out for me. But the fact that more than one of you are reporting it leads me to believe that the issue may still be on my end.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what is this project all about? Let's see.
It's Eclipse. It's Java.
All right. So, if I recall correctly, the discussion started with this this search.jsp.
Correct.
Yeah, and I can kind of already see a problem here. Now he's using another tag library that I actually don't use when I write this stuff. But that being said, it's missing an action attribute, from my best understanding. But the next question is, how is he handling this? Let's see. Site. Oh, good God. All right. So.
The SH flight controller, I think.
Is that where he's trying to post it?
I would imagine.
There we go. All right. So it's got a request mapping to search. So that's going to be my first instinct. But the controller has a mapping to flight. So I already know now that the URL for this should look something along the lines of flight/search, but what's the name of this project? Oh, that's going to be a mess. Tell you what, I'm going to save here. This form is not going to work yet, but what I'm going to do is go ahead and do a build on this real quick and get it running so I can see what the base URL for it looks like.
Okay.
All right, it builds. So let's run it on the server and see what comes of it. Ruh-roh. Ah, okay, fair enough. So what just happened there is basically too many things were mapped to the same path. And so I had to get rid of one of them. All right. So while I'm waiting on this, Jennifer, what are you asking me to discuss? Milestone 2 is all about us using the Spring framework. So this is where Spring MVC comes into play. there's really not much else to talk about there. But I'm kind of curious, I guess, where you're struggling with that. And I know you've got just a few minutes. Let's see here. So this wants me to log in.
He did give a password for it. It was, let me grab it.
I'm assuming it's hard-coded.
I also think so, but I can maybe find it easier. I think he put it, or maybe he didn't even. Maybe you just register actually on this one. Yeah, I think I'm thinking of my own peer reviews. You can register, and it should work when you register.
Well, let's give it a spin. Oh. Oh, look at that. All right, sweet. So it gives me the base URL right there, though, in the address bar. So I'm going to go ahead and make that change to the search page. Now I'm going to stop running this at the server because I want to throw it in debug. Stop, stop, stop. Thank you. All right, so the flight controller has that. Put to form. Uh-oh. Oh, there it is. Okay, sweet. So y'all notice that there are two different controller methods, both of them mapped to the search value. But one is an HTTP GET request, and the other is an HTTP POST, so that's really nice. Good to see you, Steve. All right, so I have the breakpoint in play. So let's see here. Yeah, I'm here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I didn't know my microphone was on.
No worries. So. Oh. I got this new keyboard. It's a mechanical keyboard that has typewriter keys on it, and it is throwing me way off. Let's see. All right, so we hit my breakpoint. So we know that the form is being posted to the right URL, and it already looks like it's about to return. It's going to redirect us to the search results controller method, which will give us the search results view. So it looks like that was all that was broken with this. Because when I hit resume, well, let's see, which one of these is me? There we go. Maybe.
Yeah, it at least brings it to the page. I don't know if he has like some set of flights in there that actually is being searched against.
Yeah, it looked like that wasn't the case in the code, but I'm not entirely sure. Give me a second. Da, 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 da. All right, so we'll try it again. All right, right, so it hit my break point. That's good. Gonna just continue. And yeah, no flights in the system. So that's consistent with what we would come to expect from this. Yeah, so he's got a flight service that's put together. Let's see, open declaration. All right, so it's injecting it. So let's open the declaration there. All right, so that's an interface. Wow. He spent some time on this. So I suspect that somewhere in here is going to be a flight service implementation of some sort, but I'm not seeing it. That might be it. Yep, there it is. All right, and that's going through to a flight repository. That's fine. So that, probably another interface. Yep. So it's probably the in-memory one. There we go. And so right now he's manually like front-loaded flights that would work. Needless to say, no one was flying from Louisville, Kentucky to roughly Anaheim, California. So let's see. What were good options that did work? St. Louis to Atlanta. I'll take it. So let's see here. Did he give dates on those just so I can kind of force them to come up? No. Oh, date string. There it is. 8/19/2017. So we're going to try to match that just so I can get something to come up. All right. That's fine. We've hit my breakpoint again. I need to go ahead and kill that. Nope, wrong one. Yeah, I must not have matched it all that well, but so at least we got that form working.
So my only other question, I guess, is obviously you have that action in to try to fix it.
Yep.
But if I run it on my end without changing that, it still does the same thing.
If you run it, it does the same thing. What do you mean?
It will load from the search page to the flights where it says there's no flights in the system without the action.
Right. And so that is where I have to go, well, maybe I didn't do much of anything at all.
Yeah.
He's using that tag library that I'm not familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's there. I've read about it in the text. I just haven't been using it, so it's not familiar to me.
Yep.
All right,
so just a different kind of an example, but your argument is obviously putting that action in and mapping it to, you know, the flight search particularly is what you would need to do, you know, and the way you're doing things typically.
Right, and again, this is where things are confusing. If we're not changing the basic functionality with what I did, then I didn't do anything. Yeah. It was already doing this, and that may be part of the built-in functionality of that tag library. Let me actually try it. I'll just go ahead and roll back my changes. Refresh the page. All right, and real quick, I'm going to cheat and grab what's in here. What in the world are these last two things? 225. What in the world is 225?
Good question. Some kind of flight method. Maybe it's passenger capacity and like passenger, seats available. Yeah.
There we go. All right, so STL to ATL on the 19th. So let's see if we can get that to work. STL to ATL. It's still going straight there. And I took out that breakpoint. I'm going to put it back in and see if it's still hitting where I expect it to hit. All right, it's there. Now I'm curious about the date situation. I'd love to know more about that. But so it looks like it was working all along, perhaps.
Yeah.
And maybe maybe the part that wasn't working was getting the matching flights, and that's something I haven't looked at.
Yeah. And my question in the post, at least, was more to that lens, right? I wanted to see how it was connecting, and it just, like you said, it's not what you were expecting either, right? Without that action value. So I wasn't sure if maybe you had an idea, but seems like.
Well, and like I said, I think from the reading that I did,
Mhm.
that form library is part, the form tag library is part of the Spring framework, and Spring does a lot of auto mapping when you use those tags. Now, to be certain, I'm not. It's that's one spot where I'm just like, I'm not certain. That may very well be me making up some stuff because I'm tired. I am noticing something else. Nice little error down here. I'm just curious what it is. Oh, okay. So turns out me throwing in the date in that format, they couldn't parse it. Which is why find matching flights didn't work, which is why the model was empty. Okay. Yeah. So do you want to keep going on this, or?
For me particularly, I was more interested in the mapping part of it.
Okay.
Some of the logic that's happening from it, I can certainly play with a little more, but I seem to always get stuck trying to get the right page to actually open from a form or whatever I'm sending in. So that was the more interesting part to me, at least.
Well, what I can do is I can kind of track you through some of mine without the tag library going on, yeah. And that may make it a lot easier.
Sure.
Let me find what app. Views. All right, so if you look on the screen, I've just got a basic HTML form. Now it's lit up with a bunch of div elements with CSS classes, and those are just to make the form look pretty. They have absolutely no technical functionality other than just managing CSS.
How do you attach a CSS form?
Okay, so for that, how can I put this? Whether you're using the XML configuration for Spring MVC, or you're using the Java annotation approach to configuring Spring MVC, you ultimately have to tell Spring, hey, there's a spot where some static files live that I need you to serve up without question. I use the Java annotation approach because that is closer to familiar territory for me coming from what I do. So that little chunk of code right there, all it is it's a resource handler that tells Spring that you may get requests for something in the resources folder, map it to that /resources and serve it up. Whatever's asked for, serve it up. And so that resources folder lives here in my web app folder. And inside of it, I've got two different things going on. I've got a style.css, and then I've got a JavaScript file that's in a scripts folder. Now that's me just being extra. I don't think we have to write any JavaScript in this class, at least not yet. I am using a user interface library called Bootstrap.
Yeah. Okay.
I have not included that as part of my project. That is actually a resource that I am pulling from somewhere off of the internet.
Okay.
To give you a better idea, I'm specifically doing this. Oh, wait, there we go. This one right here. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling Bootstrap's custom CSS file from a content delivery network. That's how I'm getting it. So it doesn't live in any folder in my project. Now that style.css does. And so that's where that resource handler comes into play.
Okay, cool.
Going back to the form, once you ignore all of the div elements that are in there, again, that's just for user interface stuff, you'll see that basically it just has a name and an ID and a class. It makes it pretty. And here's the stuff that you really have to worry about. I need to break this up. Hold on a second. Actually, there we go. So here I'm manually defining the action, so it needs to go to the register method on the account controller in the air travel service project. It needs to post there. And then this is how it should be encoded. It's just a standard issue form. And then, so we look at this path and we're like, all right, so that means that this is the base directory, so we don't have to worry about anybody mapping to that. That's an automatic thing. So then we just have to worry about the account and the register part. The account is mapped at the class level to the account controller with that little highlighted chunk of code there. And then, so going from account to register, that is mapped specifically to a register or register confirm controller method. And what makes the difference there is whether or not we're getting something at register or we are posting something to register. So when we first go to register, so we go to /register, it presents us with a form that we can use to fill out. And then when we submit that form, we're sending a post request right back to register, and it's handled in this code. Sorry, I'm looking at two screens at once. That code right there. And then you'll see all I did was throw a to-do item there because I wasn't ready yet. And that's really all there is to it. Mapping, I'll be honest, mapping in Spring MVC is a little more difficult than I've grown accustomed to. But maybe I'm just spoiled coming from the Microsoft world.
Yeah, I think for me, Spring almost seems easier to understand to a certain extent for the mapping, but I think the whole get and post thing has been actually probably screwing me up a lot for what you just said there.
All right.
Might actually be pretty helpful to me, so I'll find out.
Yeah, so get is just that. It's get the page. And then post is sending data to it. And so those types of requests are distinctly different as they go across the network. And so that's what allows us to identify them explicitly and then handle them accordingly.
Yeah, I've basically almost been trying to use them probably nearly the same, which is probably not helping me any.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I think I've been trying to basically use both of them almost the same, so that's probably not been helpful for my progress between get and post. But that's good to know. I think that could help me a lot, actually, so thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I sent a question out to our instructor because I wanted to make sure that that he and the former instructor and the curriculum designer weren't making a mistake with the term they were using, specifically unit testing. The mistake I was concerned they might be making is clumping two different types of code testing into one single term. It's in software development, as you start getting more and more into it and your projects become more complex, you end up doing two different forms of testing. One is called a unit test, and that is strictly testing one class. So you've created, for instance, you've got a flight service, and your flight service performs 3 different functions. So you would write a unit test that grabs an instance of the flight service and then tests the crap out of each one of those methods. That's a unit test. The other type of testing that comes into play is called integration testing. And that's where you take an instance of, say, flight service, and you start playing with other classes as well. You start integrating those classes and their functionality together to create that complex function, that complex thing that you need to happen. And so I was asking him about, is he strictly meaning unit testing, or is he doing it kind of like lazy developers do, where we say unit testing, but what we really mean is both unit testing and integration testing. He confirms it is just the easier of the two. They just want us to do unit testing. So that was really cool.
Cool.
So did y'all want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I guess what comes to mind for me is you're saying you'd want to obviously be testing your basic Java files kind of on their own, essentially.
Right. So I've got some really basic demo code written that kind of explains exactly what's happening there. And it also gives us a baseline understanding of some of the functionality that comes with the testing suite that they are suggesting we use, which is JUnit. So the base of my little demo app here is two classes. One is called myClass. And what myClass does is it holds a name, an ID, and a secret. And so myClass is basically almost like it's like the key to a lockbox. And so, of course, like any class, it has private attributes and then public getters and setters. No other squirrely functionality to it, I don't think. Actually, wait, there's one little squirrely functionality. It's called calculate key. And so what calculate key does is it says that it's going to return the value of whatever the ID is times whatever the secret is. And you'll see more how this works here in a minute. The other class in here is the lock class. And it's essentially the lockbox in which an instance of my class lives. So I'll just make life easy by talking about it. So what happens is the lock is locked until you, the user, provide the secret. The secret is the key to get into it is the secret times the ID. So for instance, if the ID is 2 and the secret is 5, then the key is 10. And the lock says that if your key, the one you provide, does not match what it calculates, it stays locked. And so roughly understanding that functionality, it's just two fairly easy classes to kind of give us an example of how to test for things. So getting started on testing, the first thing you got to make sure you do is have a reference to JUnit in your POM file. All of my demo here is going to be done based on JUnit 4. There is a version of JUnit 5, that is still in the works, but people are starting to use it. Also, it appears that in using some of the Maven archetypes that are out there to create these templated out MVC projects, they are falling back to JUnit version 3, which is a little bit different. So be mindful of that as you're starting to look at some of this code. So JUnit 4, specifically 4.8.1, is the only dependency I really need here. I did also write some code to kind of talk about what integration testing is, but since we don't have to do it, I won't waste your time. So all of your testing takes place, because Maven is smart, all of it takes place in a folder called test, and it is basically laid out just like your main folder is. So it has a Java folder, and inside of that it has a package. In this case, the package is io.knobcreek.unit_testing. And then it's got two sub-packages inside of it. One is the IT sub-package, and that's where I did the integration testing. We don't need to worry about that one. But then we have the unit testing itself. So when you're doing unit testing, you create a class that has a list of tests for the class that it's meant to describe. So this my class test, for instance, it is meant to describe the my class that we looked at earlier, and it has tests in it. Now, typically tests are, so again, the test is just to assure that what you know to be the functionality actually matches what the functionality truly is. So we know that we intend that if the ID is set to 2 and the secret is set to 5, then we know that calculating the key should lead to a key of 10. And so we're going to assert that. We're going to say, hey, we know that 2 times 5 is 10, and we know that that is how we wanted to calculate the key. So the key that the code calculates should be equal to the key that we calculated, which is 10. And that's what this test is all about. So the test, any unit test, is typically broken down into 3 steps. Arrange, act, and assert. Now, you're not going to see this particular, like this strict adherence to the layout in a lot of the Java examples you'll see. This comes a lot more from my my Microsoft training. But the principles apply. So when you arrange, what you're doing is you're setting up your test. So for our test, what I need is an instance of my class whose ID is 2 and the secret is 5. And we go ahead and give it a name. It's called my secret key. Once we've arranged it, we then act upon it. So what I'm doing in that act is I'm creating a new integer called key calculation, and I'm setting it equal to what my class code is calculating as the key in that calculate key method. And then the actual test occurs at the assert step. So what I'm doing is I'm asserting that the key that was calculated is equal to the key I know to be the case. So if this test passes, then my code is solid as far as it will calculate the key correctly. And we leave the test in play so that later on, as changes happen to the code, we run all of our tests again. And if some old test starts failing, then we know that we've made a code change somewhere along the way that is breaking something. So we've created this test. Let's go ahead and run it. So when you're running one, the easiest way to deal with it is by going to Window and then Show View, and you'll end up having to go to Other. And what you'll type in there is JUnit. When you do that, it will provide you with a view that looks like this. And right now it's fairly meaningless. But here in just a second, when we start running tests, you'll see where that screen makes sense. So I'm going to take this My Class test. I'm going to right-click on it. I'm going to run as a JUnit test. And so the JUnit window pops up, and it says, all right, we found one test and we ran it. It ran fairly quickly. We couldn't even calculate a time for it. And it passed. The green bar up at the top just lets you know that your test passed, which means that your code does what you expect it to do. Does that make sense so far?
I think so.
It makes sense for me, the concepts and everything. I guess the only thing that I'm a little unsure is what is JUnit actually doing for you here? Is it giving you like those assert methods or?
Yes. So it's giving you the assert methods, or the assert object, which in turn it gives you a bunch of different assert methods. Assert equals. There's a failure method where you can intentionally make your test fail. That's mainly to test failure points. It's kind of weird that way. It also gives you the annotation for test, that at test that you see up there.
Gotcha.
Because that's also what triggers Eclipse, JUnit, and Maven, all of them, to let them know, hey, there's a test that needs to be run here. So this test that I wrote for the lock is a little more complex, and technically it falls dangerously, well, not necessarily. Never mind. I take that back. So with this unit test, it's got an instance of the lock object, and it set the key to 10. So what we're doing here is we're running a bunch of tests at once, which is technically bad form, but we let it slide for now because this is really just a demo. So the first test we're running against is we're just saying that given this new lock, the lock, when it is created, should automatically be, the lockbox should be locked. So the first statement on line 15 is just saying that we're asserting that when we ask if the lock is locked, it comes back as true. The next thing we're doing is we're asserting that when we, knowing that we have set the key for the lock to 10, we're saying that when we ask the lock to unlock and we provide it with the key of 10, so those keys match, we know that when those keys match, the lockbox or the lock itself will unlock. So we're asserting that that's going to unlock. So it's going to be true. And then that next test after that is essentially another test against whether or not things are locked. We know that it had a key of 10, and we know that we've provided it. So we know that the lock, the lockbox itself is locked until it was given that key, then it became unlocked. So what we're doing now is we're saying, all right, so we know that we've unlocked this thing. Let's make sure that it's reporting back to us that it is indeed unlocked. So we're saying that the value false is equal to what the lock should return when we ask it, is it locked? And then the funny thing is we're locking it back and playing with the values some more. So does that make sense as to, I guess, what's happening there? It's all, so far, it's all just assert equals.
Yep.
All right. Then I'm going to grab both of these. And now it won't let me do it. 2 seconds. Come here. There we go. So I'm going to the entire project and I'm running it as a JUnit test. Now it sees that I have, oh, that's right, I have integration testing in there too. So we won't pay attention to that right now. But the first 2 tests that are on the screen are the 2 unit tests that we wrote. So one is testing the lock, the other is testing the key. So this is a basic demo on how to make it work. A lot of the best practices of the field make this a much more complicated thing to discuss, so I ignored them. That's why my tests are insanely long, especially this test lock. This test lock should technically be handled in about 3 or 4 tests as opposed to 1. Because you really, when you write a test, you want to say that given this object and under these circumstances, under this specific circumstance rather, I expect this value. So given a lock with a key of 10, when unlocked with a key of 10, returns unlocked. And that's what these tests are all about. They just basically test every bit of the functionality for each and every one of the objects you create. So does that make, I mean, does that make sense? Is that something that y'all think that you could do as you're building out these new classes in your like milestone 2, for instance?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, I would agree. I think getting JUnit in might be a little bit more work than I maybe know I'm ready for, but I'm sure it's probably not too awful. The actual testing part doesn't seem all that bad.
Well, so I teach unit testing to my junior developers by making them do what's called test-driven development. And what test-driven development is that you go ahead and you put a unit testing system in your project, whatever it is. In Java, they tend to use JUnit. In the C# world, we use NUnit. There are a bunch of other things we can use. Whatever testing suite you're using is irrelevant. You get it set up, right? You just get it and get it installed so that it can be used. And then before you write a single line of code in your project, you write a test for that functionality that you're trying to create. So you write the test first and then write code that makes that test pass. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's the basic gist of it. Let me get my mouse to work again. There we go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to write another test. Uh-oh. Do I need to capitalize things? That's what I need to do. Also need to stop looking at the shared screen. Let me see. Yeah, there we go. All right, so public void. What I'm doing with this test is I'm intentionally creating a test that will fail. Oh, it's not going to let me put a static reference there. That's fine. So we're going to assert failure. It's just automatic. And so having done that, we save the tests. And let's see here. Back to the project. Run as JUnit test. Now you'll see that there's a red bar. That means we failed something. That's also displayed up here in the failures on the right-hand side. We know that it was specifically this test because of the blue icon next to it, which is really hard to see on this screen, and I'm sorry. So we have this failing test, and our job as developers, when we see a test that fails, is to make it pass. Now, in this case, we're intentionally asserting that a failure will occur. So, if we know that a failure will occur, we can just say that we're expecting a failure. By saying assertion failure, we're saying expected equals assertion failure.class. Now, why is it red? Did I spell it wrong? Assertion failed error, my bad. Yeah, no? There we go. Little import error there. So now what we're saying is that this test expects a failure, and it will be of type assertion failed error, because that's the error that we triggered when we said to assert a failure. So now, funny enough, this test still fails. Why? Oh, because I didn't save it. Casey. We run it again, and now my test passed. So that's what we do with this unit testing, is that we write tests that test the functionality of our code, and then when they fail, we fix it. Now, usually the failure point is in the code you're testing, the code up for test, and not the test itself. But the test itself is also a good place to look. In this particular example, the issue was entirely in the test. The test was asserting a failure. So the only thing we can do is expect failure. And when we expect failure, then that's a passing scenario. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, so there's that. Where else can I go with this?
Well, I know for myself, I'm just gonna have to completely start over. And just
you may not necessarily have to start over, unless you're not using the Spring MVC framework, in which case, yeah, you're probably gonna have to start over.
Yeah, I am using the Spring and the. God, I hope I am.
Well, you'll know if you look in your code somewhere in there, you should find at least one class that ends in the word controller.
Yes.
If you've got that, then you're using Spring MVC, so there's no need to start over so much as perhaps make some tweaks and then pick up and move on. Because I hate to say it, but you don't have a lot of time to start over either. Milestone 2 is a bear.
Is it? Ah, shit.
And the reason I say that is because I looked over Milestone 2 again because I didn't even intend to work on it until sometime probably this weekend. That's just how I roll, apparently.
Yep.
You are going to have to create user accounts. So your form, you're going to have to create a form that allows you to register users and then post and then take that data at your controller level and put it in an XML file for later. You're then also going to have to create a mechanism, a form that, based on their search criteria, presents a list of flights that they can then purchase. So that's going to be a scenario where you've created essentially a shopping cart, probably hiding somewhere in their session. And then ultimately that session would need to be pushed to a database. But right now we're not going to worry about a database because we're not there yet.
Okay, good.
So at least your cart would have to exist in a session, and your session would end up having to be ultimately posted to a controller, where storing it to a database and processing a sale is kind of handled by just saying, this is a to-do item. This is a thing I need to do. It's not something you have to do now. You're also going to have to, so to deal with the form in the XML, you're going to be creating a user object that maps to what you would store about a user. And then all the code that's necessary to create, read, update, and delete that user from your XML file. That's going to be the toughest part. But they also want you to integrate some sort of service that provides flight data.
Okay.
Now, it says that it suggests that you could use the Google QPX Express API. But you don't have to. And frankly, that Google APIs are a bear. I've worked with them professionally in languages I'm much more familiar with, and they are god-awful. So the alternative is that you can just create a service, so a REST service, that works as a travel API. So basically what that really is that is your form for searching for a flight going to your controller. Your controller taking the form data and sending it off to another class. You would call it you would build it essentially like you would a controller, though.
Okay.
That's where things get weird. Because controllers aren't just for getting a web page or sending data from a web page to a server. Controllers handle any kind of web request. To kind of give you that idea, I'll show you some of my code that, in a very quick and dirty way, implements a RESTful service. Let's see if I've still got it around here. Is it in my home controller? Ow, 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 ow. Let's see. I did something. What did I do with it? Oh, here, I'll just do it this way. So in my register.js, oh, this is jQuery validate that I used here. Oh, no, there we go. There we go. So that's not what I wanted, though. Crap, I haven't implemented a service yet. But I did call upon one, so this will give you a rough idea. For my search form, what I did is I'm using an external, so an outside RESTful service created by a company called Ziptastic. And what it does is I'm sending it a zip code. And it is returning to me the city and state where that zip code should be. So if I say 40223, then it knows to go to Louisville, Kentucky. So that makes it easier to fill out the registration form that I built. Uh, Ultimately, though, your RESTful service is basically a controller that returns JSON. So that's your JavaScript object notation. It's not, it's just, at that point, it's just a JavaScript way of saying, here's your data.
Okay.
So I'm actually going to call upon this particular API, show you what it looks like. So what I did here is I sent an HTTP GET request to that API. And if you look at the address bar, you'll see that I provided it with the one parameter it wants, and that's the zip code for 40165. That's where I live. And then it did its job. It using a RESTful service. It provided JavaScript object notation or JSON data. That tells me that, okay, 40165 deals with the city of Shepherdsville in the U.S., in the county of Bullitt, state of Kentucky. Gives me a little extra data there that I don't end up using. And so I'll show you what that does when I run on server. So this is my milestone 1, and that service specifically deals with this page right here. So as I'm filling out this form for my new account, you'll notice that there's nowhere for me to put a city or state, but as soon as I put in a zip code, it handles it. So if I delete that out of there and say another zip code, it makes another call to that RESTful service and gets back JSON data that ultimately says where that zip code is.
Okay.
Now,
So, quick question: setting up that service is part of the project?
so setting up a service is part of that project. Setting up this one, not necessarily. But specifically what the rubric calls for, it says, build a RESTful service that works as a travel API service. You can also use any public travel API service instead, such as Google QPX Express. But that's going to be a bear, so of course you'll just end up wanting to create your own. That'll be the easiest thing, because then you can just return whatever garbage data you want, mocked up fake flight data as a JSON object or JSON data.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so something like that, actually, that was, let's see. So code for dealing with a service would ultimately live in a controller file. It is usually in a separate controller. And it can be mapped to a separate directory. So kind of like how my account, like the flight controller in the code we looked at before was mapped to /flight. My account controller is mapped to /account. Your RESTful service would have a service controller or REST controller, whatever you want to call it, and it would be mapped to something that says that it is a service. So like /API, /REST, something like that. And that separate controller is really all you need to get a quick and dirty RESTful API together. Now, as you start looking through some of the tutorials online about how to set up a RESTful service, what they tell you to do is actually create a separate web context to handle that service. And I'm going to leave that in y'all's very capable hands, honestly. I'm not going to create a separate web context. I'm literally going to create another controller, map it to /API, and then let the requests hit there. Requires a little more security on my end, because then I have to say, okay, well, all the possible web actions can come to this controller as opposed to just specifically ones for a service. So I have to only allow it to, to do post, for instance, HTTP post requests, and it can only return JSON data. It can't return anything else. That's how you define that service.
Okay, I'll read over that some more and get just because from the discussion board, we mostly were just, I mean, I didn't get to read too much into RESTful service just because we're working on the milestone 1 so much.
Right.
But so I'll read more about that.
Yeah, and I can't remember where in the text that is off the top of my head, but if I figure it out, I'll let you know so you kind of have a head start there.
That would be great.
Okay.
So what else we got?
I'm just overwhelmed, but this is a big
It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
It is.
It's just like every single thing you're saying is a whole new concept.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just where do you start? You know?
One small thing at a time is where you start.
Mm-hmm.
I teach this stuff in 22 weeks. It's 2 classes, 11 weeks each, with a 2-week break in the middle. And it's still overwhelming, even done at that speed. So done at this speed of 10 weeks, especially when most of us don't even have a background in much more than creating a Hello World app in Java, it's overwhelming. But I'll tell y'all the same thing that I tell my students. One very small victory at a time. So you know that in order to fulfill one of the parts of this rubric, it says you have to have the ability to create user accounts. And then later on in the description, it says you'll write the user information to an XML file and read from that to display it back. All right, so that's still overwhelming. So let's step back a little bit further. You have to have a form. Right, and the form is intended to allow you to create user accounts. So you create the register form, which is right here. Doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be a form, and it has to post back somewhere that makes sense. You don't even have, you can kind of figure out where it will go before you've created the place it'll go. So for me, I knew that anything that had to do with user accounts needed to go to an account controller. So before I even created the account controller, I said, all right, the action for this is / my project, air travel service, / account. And it just makes sense. We're registering a new account, so the action there should be register. So / register, and then I know it's a post. Because whenever you send a form data to anything on a web server, it's a post request, usually. And so then you create the form. What kind of data would you need to collect in order to properly have a user? And so at that point, you just think back, well, what have my registration forms looked like for other online services? And then in the end, it boils down to name, address, username, password, something to that effect. So you create an HTML form. It doesn't have to do anything yet. Just create the form. Once you've got the form created and it looks the way you want it, then you're like, all right, well, how do I get this form data to the server? And so one small victory at a time, you create the account controller class. There's your victory. Then you create a method called register. There's that victory. You set a debug breakpoint in the register method, and then you set your action on the form to go there if you haven't already, and you submit the form. If the form hits the breakpoint, then you already know your form works, and so does your mapping. So you've got tons of small victories there, and you just keep moving forward. You know that you have this form data. It's now in your controller. We know it needs to go to an XML file. How do we get it there? It's just again, it's one small thing at a time, and I know, my God, I'm overwhelmed by it, so I know y'all are.
That is reassuring, at least.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that does help though, to just take it one step at a time. It's just gonna take forever with the amount of stuff we have, but that's to be expected, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean this is a daunting class. It really is. Because I mean it took me. Did my screen freeze? Sorry, I just caught the group
It
chat.
did back then. That's okay.
All right. So again, it took me much longer than even the 22 weeks in which I teach it. It took me longer than that to wrap my head around the equivalent technology in the Microsoft world. When I started my first job as a developer, I was familiar with doing desktop apps in C#. That was kind of what I did. And my boss came into my office and he says to me, all right, what I need you to do is take this code and move it over to an MVC, an ASP.NET MVC web application. So basically the C# equivalent of what we're doing with Spring here. And I looked at him and I said, Jeremy, what the hell's an MVC? And yeah, needless to say, crash course.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah, and so what you're dealing with right now is exactly what I was dealing with at that job. Is the instructors have said to you, create an MVC web app, and your first question is, what the hell's an MVC? Well, here you are.
Okay. That helps.
Yeah.
We're pretty much not going through anything that anybody else wouldn't in this field.
No, and the thing about it is I like to tell people that honestly, being a developer comes with paying a lot of dues.
Mm-hmm.
This is your dues right here. This pain, this frustration, this I can't find a source that isn't complicated. That's the dues you pay for the job that we've picked. But once you get past it, it's worth it.
Well, that's good to know. Thank you for that.
Well, I mean, let's just think about it this way. All right. Like none of that, like psychological satisfaction stuff. Let's just be realistic. We're grown-ups. We did not come here just to get a master's degree. We came here to get a master's degree and make money. If you want an upper middle class income from being a developer, these are the dues you pay, and they hurt and they suck. And let me tell you, I drank a lot as a junior developer.
Good to know.
I have no shame in admitting that.
Oh, funny.
Hmm.
Oh, man.
So what else can I do? How else can I help?
Would you mind if we went over map requests or request mapping one more time?
Sure. How do you want me to do that? I mean, do you want me to just essentially create a new controller method, map it
that
out?
would be great.
Tell you what, I'll do you one better. I'll create a whole new controller.
Awesome.
All right, so for that, let's see. Do I have an app that I can just beat up? All right, that's the servlet app. I don't want that. Why is that even there? Go away. Okay, yeah, this is the one I was working with last week. Fantastic. So in this project right now, let me make that the only thing we see. In this project right now, it's the same MVC archetype that I've been telling everybody to use since I figured out where it was. Because it automatically builds a Maven project configured for Spring MVC and automatically configures some baseline stuff for you off the jump. So you don't even have to think about this. It's already done. It handles the static resources you need with the resource handler, and it tells you that for any view that you may create, you'll find it in the views folder. And it even gives you that home controller here that already has a corresponding view here. So running with that, I'm going to create another controller. And so what I'm doing is to that controllers folder, I'm adding a class. There we go. And I don't even know what we want to call this. What do we want to call this? I'll call it a demo controller. Why not? All right, so right now, all it is an empty class. And so the first thing that we do to create that controller is we give it the controller annotation. And that just says to the Spring framework, hey, this is a controller and you need to be mindful of it when you initialize this web app. Now to make that work, you do have to, for the class, import the controller from Spring Framework. Cool, so we have a controller. Now at this point, we can handle mapping one of two ways. We can do class level mapping by just saying request mapping, and we'll say demo. Now to make that work, come here. You have to import the request mapping from the Spring Framework. But once that works and I stop typing all crazy, there we go. So now what happens here automatically, before we do anything else, is that you will find anything on this controller at Spring MVC demo /demo, right? Because we use the project name is the base directory. So Spring MVC demo /demo. Now I don't have any views or anything else set up, so there's that. But so here we say, all right, what do we want? So we can consider a controller to be a lot like a folder. So in the demo folder, what do we even want to expose to our people? For now, I'm just going to create a, let's see here. Yeah, we'll call it index. Why not? All right, so what I've done is I've created a method. It returns a specific Spring framework type of object called model and view. Model and view is a type of servlet, but you don't really need to worry about that. Just know that the object itself contains a reference to the HTML that is used to render your page, as well as the data that you're attempting to send to your page, whatever that data may be. Now, we've created this method, but it is not mapped to anything, so it will never execute. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to map it. So we'll use that same request mapping annotation, and we're going to say /index. So now what that means, kind of to give us a comment, is that that's going to go Spring MVC demo /demo /index. That's our URL to get to whatever this particular controller method is serving up. But now it has to serve up something. And the easiest way to serve up anything from a controller is just to simply send a new instance of model and view with the name of the view you want to show. So I'm going to return a new model and view. And I'm not going to, gosh, I can't type, save my life today. There we go. And so now we know we're going to return it a model and view. Now we just have to give it a path to get to whatever that model and view is. Because you remember from reviewing the MVC configuration, this whole view resolver just says that for any views that you're seeking, you will find them here in that folder. So keeping that in mind, we're going to say that we want to return 2 seconds. All right. We want to return, let's say, /demo /index. Right? Now that makes life easy because now your view is in a similar path as your controller. So everything kind of just lines up, right? So let's save that. But now we've got one last thing left to do. We're telling it that we want it to serve up a view that can be found in the demo folder. Sorry, doing two things at once. It can be found in the demo folder in a view called index. So we need to give it that view. So we know from our resource mapping that it's going to be found in the web-inf and then views folder. And then we're saying it'll be in the demo folder, a view called index. So we're going to create a new folder. We're going to call it demo. And we're going to create a new, oh, come here, JSP file. And we're going to call it index. And just for the sake of saving time, I'm going to grab that. Throw it in here. Okay. So we've created a controller, a brand new controller, so a brand new folder in our web app. We've created a controller method that corresponds to a page within that folder. We've created the view for it. There is no model, it's just static data. So based on this, if I go run as Maven install, all right, we have a build success. And then I go to run as, run on server. Restart the server, that's perfectly fine. I'm gonna watch the console real quick just to make sure I didn't make any mistakes. Sweet, all right, so that's one thing we were looking for. Now, we should be able to go to /demo/index, and there we are, that's the page we were looking for. Now, was that the mapping you were talking about?
That's the mapping I was talking about.
All right, so did that make sense that go round?
It did, it did. It's still a lot, but it made a lot more sense.
Sweet. So we got that squared away. I do want to show you one other thing. Oh, wait, I did actually create a, last week, I created a quick and dirty JSON service, essentially, RESTful service.
Okay.
So I thought I'd show you that now that I've found the code for it. Then I'll get back to where I was going. But all this does is it says, so it's in the data controller. So looking at that controller, that means it's mapped to /data. So considering this is our Spring MVC demo, I'm actually going to go back over to my browser real quick. So it's in /data. And then the individual method is mapped to JSON demo. Now, the return type is a little different. It's not the model and view that we expect from, from returning a full-on HTML page. Instead, we're just returning data. So we just return it's essentially, we're returning an object of type course, but there's that annotation next to it that just says that this is a response body. So this is just data. That's all that annotation says, is that this is just purely data. And when you give it that annotation and you return an instance of an object, the object is automatically converted into JavaScript object notation, such that going to that JSON demo looks like this. So that is a JavaScript object notation representation of this class right here. And so I created an instance of that class and then just returned it as a response body. And in doing so, that came through to the browser as JSON. Now, later on, you would consume that either from another controller or using JavaScript, which is how I tend to do it. But in this course, I think the preference is probably that you aim for consuming that RESTful service from another controller, because I don't think that JavaScript's within the scope of the course. Anyway, so we're there. The reason I came in here, though, was actually to show you this. It's a slightly more complicated version of what we just talked about when we return a model in view. So in our previous demo, what we did is we returned a new instance of model in view that had the name of the view we wanted to return, and that was it. In this case, what we're doing is we're creating that new instance of model in view, and we're still giving it the view we want to return, but now we're loading up the model with some information, because the model is a representation of the info that should be shown on your screen. It's your data. So we're creating data for this. So I created an instance of that course object, loaded it with a course number and a course title, and then I added it to that model in view object. So that is the model. And so if I go back in here to my website, I believe it is mapped this way. No, it is not. So, oh wait, yeah, it probably is actually. Give me 2 seconds. Yeah, that's my mistake. So what's happening here is that this is returning that about view with that course data. So let's look at the about view real quick. So the about view is a typical HTML file. It has a table inside of it, and then it has expression language going on in there that touches the model and says, all right, I know you've got this model. Show me the course number property of that model. Show me the course title property of that model, which is how this table came to exist. So adds a layer of complexity to it. Instead of just returning a static HTML model or static HTML view, you're now returning a view that is expecting data from the model. And you're using expression language to access that data.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that's really the toughest part right there. Now, you will eventually get into scenarios where your model is not as simple as just a single instance of a single Java class. And for that, we return to the code. And we go, I'm going to have to go into a different project for this, specifically, let's see here. My home controller. It should be my search. Where are we at? Where's the reference to that? There we go. All right, so what's happening here is that this is a response to a form post. So this is where I start searching for my flights in my project. And so what it's doing here is it's mapped to the /search, and it only accepts HTTP post requests. And when this runs, come on, turn on. There we go, I need my light. What it's doing is it's saying that whatever is given to me from that form, make the model bind to this search query object that I created. That's kind of complicated. Ultimately, what it's saying is, whatever's in the form, make it an instance of this object so I can use it. Now, we don't end up using it because I just throw dummy data at it. But the part that you need to be mindful of is when your model contains more than just a single instance of a class, it actually contains a list of instances of classes. So what we're doing here in this generate a demo airfare is it's going down here and it's creating 5 dummy flights that are returned, or rather front-loaded, as a list of type search results. So it's a list of objects. So to deal with that when it's sent to the view, things get a little more complicated. And I'm just showing you this so that you're aware that it exists. Ultimately, the book has some fairly solid examples of this. So I definitely encourage you to look there. But what's happening here is I'm using the the Java standard tag library. So it has its own little type of, they look like HTML tags, but they're special tags, just kind of like the form tags we looked at in that fella's project. And so this particular tag, all it does is it just supports some additional functionality to help you display things from your model. In this case, that tag is a for each tag. So it's just saying that for each item that's presented to you in the search results or in the results, create a table row, create table data cells that hold all of that table data so that ultimately when you get your search results back, they're presented as a table. So, do I have this out there? Ow. Okay, cool, I do. So I should just be able to go, wow. Why is my, oh, my bad. All right. This is me posting to that search controller. Uh-oh. Whoopsie daisy. Go back and try this again. It might be that I need to update the project on the server, but we'll get there. Let's see. Cross-site. Really? Stand by. Servers, air travel server. It's synchronized. That's really weird. We're gonna restart this bad boy. Wow, it is fighting me. I'm not sure why. What changes have I made to my project that would cause it to fight me? Oh, whoa, I broke everything. There we go. Huh. Wonder what I broke. I'm broken something playing around with this code, so unfortunately I'm kind of screwed there for now.
Uh-oh.
Well, thankfully I've been using source control to keep track of my code, so worst case scenario, if I can't fix this fairly quickly, I can always roll back to a previous version, which is something else I'm amazed they haven't had us doing. Hold on just a second. All right, sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm surprised they haven't had us using source control. Has anybody said anything in any of your programming classes? It looks like a nope. Huh. That's a shame. All right, let me figure this out real quick. Oh, I have a breakpoint there? Oh, that's wonderful. And Going to, come on, run as debug. All right, I'm gonna try to give this one more spin to see where the failure is, and if I can't get it working, then we'll have to move on. All right, almost there. That took forever. All right, so not even making it to the break point. That is really weird. What have I done to this? Wonder if it has to do with me having put because I've gone ahead and integrated Spring Security into it. So I'm curious if maybe that didn't cause the problem. Yeah, that's what it is. That's all right. Watch this. Let's see. So security web application initializer uses the security configuration. I literally just don't even need this code to run right now. All right, block comment on that. Source, block comment on that. Save it. How is it already in use? Oh, crap. I hate when that happens. All right, so now Tomcat has completely crapped out on me. That happens from time to time. So I'm going to give up on this pursuit for now and at least try to get Tomcat working. In the interim, what else do y'all have for me? We're coming up on the hard stop at 9, so.
I think I'm okay.
Yeah, I think that's been enough for tonight.
Yeah, I figured it might be because this has been, like, honestly, I've put so many hours in trying to figure this crap all out this week. And I'm still probably about 2 chapters behind the reading. And of course, the reading ultimately leads to me watching YouTube videos for 4, 5, 6 hours.
Me as well.
Because I don't learn from reading. I can read the book all day, and I don't know anything more when I'm done. I read it so that I know kind of what I need to look for, and then go from there.
I kind of do the same thing. I mean, the Java class that we had in this major was really good for teaching Java, but like I don't come from an IT background, so having the HTML and XML and that like just is gibberish to me, you know?
Yeah, and I'm surprised because I'm surprised that there hasn't been some sort of intro to web class.
Yeah, that's what I talked about. I Skyped with our new teacher for a while on Sunday, and I told him that I was like, we don't have any build up to this class. It's just a one Java course in coding, and then this.
Yeah,
I feel like there should be a class between those two.
oh, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, because it's tough to wrap your head around HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? Because you're going to have to know some JavaScript at some point working on a web app. So that would be an intro to web class, in my opinion. And then wrap your head around Java as a server-side language, XML, JSON, the concept of RESTful services versus SOAP, you know, the MVC architecture. And if you're looking at the book, you realize that even my code is not quite following the book because they use a service and repository pattern where basically your data at the database or in memory or XML, what have you, is never touched by your controller. Instead, your data should be touched by a repository class. Your repository class should never be touched by a controller. It instead should, there should be a service class that grabs the repository. And then your controller can touch the service. That's all part of that separation of concerns thing where if your data is not making it to the controller, you start tracing it back through the layers of business logic, right? So your service, so your data is your data, whatever it may be, SQL database, XML. Your repository does not care what your business logic is. Your repository simply gets data from the database. And then your service says, all right, I have this data. This data represents something for this business, and this business has some kind of logic that has to be applied to this data before it should be provided to anyone. And so the service does that type of manipulation before it returns it to the controller, which then will pass it on to the model portion of your model and view object, which then will allow you to put it in your view. So you see that kind of gets crazy there too. And I'm amazed that that's even in there, to be honest with you. Because that just adds more and more layers of confusion.
It's just too many layers in such a short amount of time you have to learn.
I agree. 10 weeks is just not enough time for that. I mean, all of the, I'll put it to you this way, the two schools within the university system that I've worked with, as well as two of the boot camps here in town that teach very similar material, they all teach this kind of stuff in terms of 6 months. We're dealing with it in 10 weeks. And I get it. This is a master's level course. So sometimes you just, I hate to say it this way, but sometimes you just got to put your big girl panties on and go.
Exactly.
But there's a limit, I think, between the amount of information that an adult can reasonably be expected to retain in 10 weeks and the amount of work that we have to put into it. And therein lies the problem. I still think 10 weeks is excessively overwhelming, even at a master's level, especially considering that Southern New Hampshire tends to gear towards a more non-traditional student, right? Students with families and jobs and things to do. It's not like we're sitting at, UCLA or, University of Kentucky or anything like that. This is geared towards grown folks. And grown folks don't have the 40, 50, 60 hours a week to put in on schoolwork that your traditional students do. So I'm blown away by the difficulty of this, but I know we can do it. It just may require us to skip a lot of the fundamentals that we probably need to know better, but we'll make it. And here comes the fun part. We'll never have to do this again.
Very true. Very true. We just got to get through it.
Week 10, that Sunday, that Saturday of week 10. And we've done our last thing with because they want us to do something with WebSockets in week 10. And that's fun. And And then we turn in our work and we have our study group where we basically just sit here and diffuse and drink wine or whatever it is you drink. And all this is said and done, you probably won't write a web app for school again. And if you do, you'll have much more time to prepare for it.
That's
Yeah.
very true.
Man, it's just, oh God.
That's what I said earlier. I think last study group. I'm just hoping to pass, so I don't have to do it again.
Yeah, I'm just praying for a C at this point.
That's what I'm going for. I mean, currently my grade's not too bad, but the bad news is most of my things haven't been graded yet.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I have a big old fat D.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, my milestone 1 hasn't been graded yet, so that's a big chunk. And then up till now, so milestone 1 up till whatever we've done.
Well, I'm pretty certain that you'll do okay on milestone 1. He knows the chaos that he walked into.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is I'm wondering how forgiving he's going to be with milestone 2 now that we've had him for what, week and a half?
Yeah.
I
just don't think that's enough time.
I wonder how far his patience and forgiveness will extend.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him for 2 hours on Sunday. We Skyped for 2 hours, and he seemed pretty forgiving and understanding about how difficult this class was.
Well, and it sounds like to me, especially considering that many of the students in this class are actually taking this as their last class, that this is the worst of it.
That's what my understanding is.
I mean, and apparently this fella teaches the mobile apps class, and I've seen people with much less experience than I pull A's out of it easy.
I took that course.
Yeah, so I'm not freaking out about it.
Mm-mm.
We just got to get through this.
This is definitely harder than the mobile app course.
Yeah, this is my first software development class.
Oh, this is the hardest one, honestly.
Wait, you didn't take 511?
What's 511? I don't think so.
That's the Java course.
Oh yeah, I got an A. I got a 96.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only other course.
Taught really well. It was basics.
Oh yeah, and we needed that. I mean, even I needed it because I'm not a Java guy. The last time I touched Java was real briefly in undergrad, and I never looked at it again. And I've got one of those memories where if I don't use it, I lose it very quickly.
Oh yeah, I'm the same way.
So, all right. Well, if y'all have nothing else for right now, then I'll go ahead and call it a night. But you know where to find me if you need anything. I'm trying my best to get caught up with the expected speed of this class. I'm about a week behind. So if you have questions about this week's material, I'm sorry.
I was going to talk about that, but we're just talking about earlier stuff. So maybe next week we can talk about this stuff.
Well, what was this week's stuff? I've completely blanked out.
It's an activity with a Spring embedded database, and then just milestone 2.
Oh, okay. Well, milestone 2 is going to be a bear. I can tell you that. And the embedded database, I've seen it used a couple of times as in memory, but I have no clue yet. I'm going to have to play with that in the coming days before I can speak to it. Thankfully, again, we have a very forgiving instructor, so hopefully he doesn't mind if he gets both of those assignments at 11:59 on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And probably not the Sunday he wanted.
Is he going to take away the whole assignments due Thursday night? I hope, I pray.
I don't know if there are anymore.
Well, typically the only assignments that end up due on a Thursday night are our peer reviews and our discussion questions.
But the peer reviews themselves, it
was hard.
So far, it's just been like a million new subjects, have it due in 4 days.
Right.
Impossible.
Well, so my takeaway from all this is that peer review is meant to help you know whether or not you're on the right track and help you get unstuck. Now, I've not spoken to this instructor for much more than discussion questions. I probably need to sit down with him on Skype for a couple hours myself. But I don't think that he expects us to have the entire project done 4 days after we just turned in, the last chunk of the project, right? I think that he just expects us to be making forward progress that can be reviewed with our peers so that we can all kind of pitch in and just help each other get through it. That's my takeaway. I don't know if that's actually what he means by it. So that might be a good question to throw into the discussion board. Actually, I feel like I already asked that question, but I'm not entirely certain.
Yeah, I'm just grateful he gave me feedback, even though I got a 6 out of 60. But whatever. I'm just grateful he gave me an example and a whole huge thing of feedback. So
Is he going to let you take another swipe at milestone 1 and try to improve that grade?
Yes, he said I can submit it as many times as I need.
Oh my goodness, I love this guy.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
hold on, I'm going to stop this broadcast.